In July 2019, the 17-year-old girl Ava Collins vanished without a trace on the Hidden Lake Overlook Trail in Glacier National Park, amid thick fog and treacherous mountain forest. For 4 years, she was presumed dead, a victim of an accident or getting lost in the wild wilderness. But one morning, a group of hikers discovered her in an exhausted but alive state, only a few kilometers from the spot where she disappeared. What Ava recounted about those weeks of survival, 2 mysterious individuals, and the events at the Reynolds Creek cabin left even experienced investigators stunned. What she went through and who really helped her survive, you'll find out in this video. Enjoy. Some names and details have been changed to protect identities and privacy. In the middle of summer, Glacier National Park unfolds like a vivid painting. A deep blue sky, golden sunlight pouring down on pine-covered mountain slopes, patches of late-season snow glistening in the light like silver streaks left over from winter. The Collins family chose the Hidden Lake Overlook Trail for that day's hike, a famous trail not only for its spectacular scenery but also for its unpredictable weather that makes even seasoned hikers cautious. Ava Collins, 17 years old, was always the most excited one on every trip. She loved the feeling of walking ahead, loved standing at the highest point to look out over the valley stretching below, loved raising her camera to capture the moment when light touched the mountain peaks in a way she believed only she could see. From the start of the journey, Ava had been walking faster than everyone else, sometimes stopping to photograph a flower growing among the rocks, sometimes running up to a small outcrop just to see if there was something better to admire on the other side. Her parents and younger brother kept a close enough distance to watch her, occasionally calling out for Ava to slow down, but that was her habit. No one thought anything was unusual. Until the wind shifted. That is the hallmark of Glacier. Sudden cold winds blowing down from Logan Pass, carrying the moisture of high mountains. The Collins family had just passed a narrow section of trail along the mountainside when the air became thick, as if the sky was taking a long breath in. And then, in just a few dozen seconds, the fog rolled in. Not gradually, not with warning. It poured down the trail like a giant white curtain dropped from the sky. The sunlight vanished. The green of the forest vanished. And Ava, who was ahead by about a few dozen meters, vanished with it. "Ava!" Her mother called out loudly, her voice mixing with the wind. There was no response. The whole family sped up, trying to run in the direction they believed Ava had just gone. But after a few steps, they realized they could see nothing but thick, white emptiness in front of them. The wooden trail markers also faded gradually, as if sinking into another world. They kept calling Ava's name, hoping to hear a reply, footsteps, or even a small sound. But Glacier at that moment was too silent in a way that made people anxious right away. They followed the trail by feel with their feet, trying to go straight. But then the fog unexpectedly split into 2 small openings, revealing 2 trail branches. One led gently uphill along the mountainside. The other descended into an area full of loose rocks. No clear footprints, no figure, no sound. Just 2 forks opening up before them, like an unanswered question. The Collins family tried searching around the area, splitting up to call Ava within the safe range that rangers had always advised. Don't go too far. Don't go down into landslide areas. Don't separate completely. But each time they returned to the starting point, the fog grew thicker, colder, heavier. Any hope that Ava had just veered off a few steps began to fade with every passing minute. Nearly an hour passed like that, an hour longer than any hour they had ever experienced. When the wind picked up strongly and the sky began to darken, they had no choice but to head down to the visitor center. Walking into the ranger station, the whole family was almost unable to breathe from panic. The father placed both hands on the counter, his voice shaking with fear and desperation, only able to say one sentence: "Our daughter is missing." When the father uttered the words, "Our daughter is missing," the atmosphere in the ranger station immediately changed. A ranger on duty was used to reports of lost hikers, but just looking at the ashen faces of the Collins family, he knew this was not a simple incident. He immediately opened a missing person file, asking quick basic questions. How old is Ava? What was she wearing? What was she carrying? How far ahead was she when she disappeared? Every answer pointed to the same thing. The time Ava was out of sight was too short for a normal person to have gone far enough to be unseen. The ranger noted the time of disappearance in the report, then asked the family to lead him to the last point where they had glimpsed Ava's figure before the fog swallowed her. He radioed back to headquarters, and within minutes, an investigator from the National Park Service was dispatched to the scene. When he arrived, the investigator didn't say much, just asked everyone to stand exactly where they had stopped last time. He began taking notes, sketching a simple trail diagram with a marker. The main path, the two branches, where each family member stood, and the spot where Ava disappeared. The fog was still lingering in light patches around the two trail branches, as if reminding them that it was the wall that had blocked everything. After recording the diagram, the investigator asked the family to describe Ava's every smallest behavior. Was she walking fast or slow? Did she turn back to talk? Did she seem tired or uncomfortable? Would she be likely to leave the trail for a better photo angle? Did she often separate from the group on previous trips? The questions came rapid and intense, but necessary to reconstruct the most accurate picture. The Collins family answered that Ava was still walking fast, but showed no unusual signs. She was only a few dozen meters ahead, a distance close enough that they could always see the shape of her jacket, until the fog came down. The investigator asked them to open their phones to view the photos taken that day. Each image was examined carefully. The angle, shadows, standing position, light direction, all helping to determine the path Ava had taken. When reviewing the step tracking data from the Mother's Health app, the investigator began sketching a relatively clear movement route. The whole family stayed on the trail, Ava ahead in the same direction, and there was no point indicating she had left the path. This made the gap of a few dozen seconds when Ava vanished even harder to explain. Based on experience, the ranger and investigator discussed three main possibilities. The first possibility, getting lost. But to get lost from the trail at that spot, Ava would have had to sharply turn onto one of the two branches or step off the path at least a few meters. The investigator noted, no reasonable reason for her to suddenly change direction. The second possibility, an accident, a slip, a fall, a rock slide. But the investigator had looked around, and the terrain where Ava lost trace had no nearby cliffs. If she fell, they would have heard a sound or seen some slide marks, but there was nothing. The third possibility, being led away by someone. This was the hypothesis the investigator didn't say out loud, just marking a small symbol on the paper. It was extremely rare, but couldn't be ruled out given the speed of Ava's disappearance. What concerned the investigator most was the fog itself. Glacier is famous for the whiteout phenomenon when clouds from Logan Pass drop suddenly low. Visibility can go from a few hundred meters to under 20 meters in just 15 seconds. The investigator stood at the spot where Ava disappeared and asked the family, how long did it take for the fog to come down? The answer? Just a few seconds. He underlined heavily the phrase, time, blind spot, a brief moment when Ava and the family completely lost sight of each other. In that gap of 20 to 30 seconds, anything could have happened, from Ava going in the direction she thought was right, to her being called away without anyone seeing. Immediately, the investigator requested a temporary closure of the area around the two trail branches to preserve evidence. Other hikers were directed to alternate routes. The search team began sweeping the area. They bent close to the ground looking for footprints, disturbed soil, light slide marks, or any sign that Ava had left the trail. They used sticks to mark every suspicious point. Everything was photographed on site to not miss any detail. After nearly an hour of initial sweeping, the investigator stepped back, looked at the overall scene, and wrote in the investigation notebook a temporary conclusion. Ava Collins could not have disappeared that quickly without some unusual factor. When the area around the two trail branches had been temporarily closed off, the search team began expanding the sweep range, slowly advancing to the edge of the mountainside, where the fog at that time was still drifting in thin layers, just a few dozen centimeters off the ground. The investigator bent down to examine every patch of untouched soil not trampled by the search team, hoping to find some trace that the Collins family's panicked eyes could not have noticed. And right at that moment, one member of the search team called out loudly, "Footprints here." The whole group immediately gathered. On the smooth, sandy soil at the edge of the mountainside, a series of small footprints appeared. Clearly women's hiking shoe prints, the size matching Ava's description. The first thing that caught attention was not the presence of footprints, but their direction. They did not follow the main trail but veered off, deviating from the trail by about 10 to 12 meters, heading down into an area full of loose rocks. The investigator knelt down to examine each imprint, measuring length, depth, stride distance. He measured while muttering, not running, not stumbling, walking normally. The steps were even, no slide marks, no scratches on rocks, no heel turns back, no signs of being dragged or pulled. They simply went straight, then stopped. Stopped abruptly, as if the person wearing those shoes had stood still right at the last position, without taking another step in any direction. But the strangest thing was, after that stopping point, there were no more traces, no continuing steps, no turning back, no sense of someone being swept away, no slide path from falling down the slope, just a chain of footprints leading off the trail, then vanishing completely, as if their owner had evaporated. The investigator narrowed his eyes, checked the soil hardness, used a stick to mark the boundary where the footprints ended. No reason for someone to leave the trail, walk straight like this, then stop here, he said, mostly to himself but loud enough for the search team to hear. Another member suggested, maybe she kept going but the ground here doesn't hold prints? The investigator shook his head. He lightly kicked the soil layer in a few nearby spots with his boot toe, proving that the fine gravel-mixed soil was sufficient to retain footprints for at least a few hours, especially with the weight of a teenage girl in hiking shoes. There was no way Ava could have continued without leaving any trace. This forced him to ask a different question. Why did Ava stop? Stop because she heard a call? Because she saw something in the fog? Or because someone was standing in front of her? The investigator noted, unusual stopping position, no returning footprints, no continuing footprints, possible standing still. From his perspective, a person walking normally then stopping would usually leave prints distributed toward forward lean or slight tilt. But here, the last two footprints were quite stable, parallel, as if the wearer had stood motionless for a few seconds or a few dozen seconds before disappearing. And disappearing how? He didn't dare write that question in the report, but it was clearly running through the minds of everyone present. When the Collins family was called up to confirm whether Ava had a habit of leaving the trail to take photos or explore, they immediately shook their heads. The mother affirmed, Ava always likes to walk fast, but she never leaves the trail. We always remind her about that, and she knows it very well. The father added, she even told us this morning that she didn't want to go into the loose rock area because it looked slippery. Those affirmations made the footprints even more puzzling. If Ava did not leave the trail voluntarily, why was there a chain of footprints leading off it? The investigator didn't say it right away, but in his mind, an idea was emerging. Maybe Ava did not leave the trail on her own. Maybe she moved off the path in response to something. Or someone. But this was still speculation, without evidence. He returned to the footprints, examining the surrounding terrain, trying to find something else that could explain this sudden stop. A strange sound? A figure in the fog? Some signal that made the 17-year-old girl believe she needed to turn in a different direction just seconds before vanishing? The investigator circled the first suspected anomaly in his mind. Off-trail movement behavior inconsistent with family description. That was the sentence he bolded in his notebook. And that was the moment the case from an ordinary missing person incident began to show inexplicable anomalies. Anomalies that everyone knew would open more questions than answers. The area where the footprints stopped abruptly prompted the investigator to immediately expand the check in directions where an accident could occur. Because if Ava left the trail unusually, the most logical thing to verify first was, did she slip, fall, or get stuck somewhere right after the spot where they found the footprints? From the marker point the search team had placed, they followed down the mountainside to check for possible falls into deeper, steep areas. Glacier is known for many cliffs interspersed with narrow crevices, hard to see from above, so any accident could leave even the smallest sign. The investigator used a flashlight and slope measurer, sweeping every meter of ground from the last footprint to the mountainside edge. He checked soil subsidence, rolling stones, scratched soil streaks, small grooves from heavy objects dragged down, signs very easy to spot if someone slipped. But the ground remained strangely undisturbed. No displaced rocks, no wipe marks on the surface, no disturbance of the fine dust layer that easily retains movement traces. Even a light fall would have to leave something. Yet that area was as if no one had touched it all day. The search team began spreading down about 20 to 30 meters, to the large boulders where hikers sometimes get their foot caught or stuck after a slip. They checked every rock crevice, shining lights into places hard for the naked eye to see. In many other missing hiker cases, people only fall into a shallow rock hollow, and it's enough to hide them from view above. But here, every crevice was clean, dry, and without any items, like hats, bags, phones, water bottles, things that often fall from victims in accidents. Even some crevices had a thin dust layer showing no one or anything had touched them for hours. Continuing cautiously, the investigator led the team to the snowfields, the areas of leftover snow from the previous season, where the snow surface is hard, cold, and quite slippery. This place is always considered dangerous if hikers step onto it by mistake. However, as they approached, the entire wide snow patch of many square meters appeared intact. Flat snow surface, no drag paths or slide marks. In such conditions, if someone slid down, they would leave a clear trail. Because summer snow in Glacier is often slightly soft on the surface, very easy to mark. But there were no such marks. No curved streaks, no grooved lines or crushed snow patches, nothing indicating Ava had ever set foot there. The investigator took notes, then reviewed the 3D terrain map of the trail section. According to the data, the area where Ava disappeared was not a natural danger point. Moderate slope, no deep drops, no slippery rugged sections. Even if Ava got disoriented in the fog, she would still be unlikely to suddenly fall off the path. Points prone to slips were at least a few meters from the stopping footprint position, meaning Ava would have had to continue past that spot. But the connecting ground showed no footprints imprinted. To avoid missing details, the investigator requested analysis of wind patterns at the time Ava disappeared. The ranger provided weather data. Wind blowing northeast, average speed 14 miles per hour, strong enough to push fog down, but not enough to cause a person to lose balance and fall. More importantly, the wind direction was opposite to the footprints direction, meaning if Ava was pushed by wind, her body would lean the other way. Yet everything at the scene showed no such thing. No rotated heels, no suddenly deviated footprints, no slight soil subsidence from shifted center of gravity. Everything indicated Ava was walking normally, then stood still, then vanished. The investigator checked the ground stability around the last footprints. He used a stick to measure subsidence, soil elasticity, and force needed to create similar prints. Result: if Ava stood there and took one or two more steps, footprints would have to continue. It was impossible for someone to take additional steps without leaving any mark, especially on fine soil mixed with small rocks like this area. Nor could she have stepped onto a surface hard enough not to imprint, because such surfaces only appear much farther. And to reach them, she would pass through softer ground that would make prints obvious. All these analyses led to an unavoidable conclusion. The location where Ava disappeared did not fit any accident scenario. The investigator began feeling an illogical discomfort. Missing hiker cases in national parks, no matter how strange, usually leave accident traces. Slide marks, scratches, dropped items, or simply continuing footprints. But this scene had none. The way the footprints stopped abruptly, the cleanliness of the entire surrounding surface, the intactness of both potentially dangerous terrain branches, all combined to make the accident scenario seem unfit. When the team completed checking the range of a radius of a few dozen meters in all three possible accident directions, the investigator stood at the last footprint position, looking down into the foggy valley. He took a deep breath and wrote in the scene report a line that made the other rangers fall silent when reading it. No evidence supporting the possibility that Ava Collins had an accident. That short note carried huge implications. Because when accident, the most reasonable possibility in every missing hiker case, was ruled out, Only much harder explanations remained. Ava did not fall, did not slip, was not swept by the snowfield, did not get lost into a dangerous area. The scene not only lacked accident traces, it also showed the absence of any physical process leading to a natural incident. And that was when the investigator realized this disappearance did not happen in the usual way. Ava Collins had vanished in a few dozen seconds, and the scene showed no sign she encountered any natural mishap. What happened after those feet stopped? That was the question starting to make the entire investigation team feel colder than the wind in Glacier. After almost entirely ruling out any possibility of an accident, the investigator turned back to the factor he knew would play the most critical role in every second. Ava vanished. The fog. Glacier is famous for its rapidly changing weather, but the phenomenon of thick white fog dropping like a solid wall still makes even seasoned visitors wary. The ranger in charge of the area provided data from the time the Collins family reported the disappearance. Cold wind from Logan Pass pushing low clouds down to the trail's elevation, sudden humidity spike, and wind shifting direction in a very short span. The investigator requested the meteorology team to simulate the phenomenon again, using real data from that day combined with the Hidden Lake Overlook terrain model. The simulation results showed that in just 20 to 30 seconds, visibility from where the Collins family stood could drop from over 100 meters to under 15 meters, even as low as about 10 meters if the wind pushed the fog right along the trail's direction. That was exactly the time frame in which they said Ava was still ahead, then completely vanished as if swallowed into a shapeless white void. The investigator stood exactly where the father had pointed, looking in the direction Ava had gone. As light wind pushed the remaining fog strips across the path, he asked a ranger to hold a whiteboard 18 meters away, then gradually back into the low fog area. The whiteboard faded after just a few steps, then disappeared, as if blending into the air. No need for digital simulation. The scene itself proved that anyone stepping into that fog layer would instantly become invisible to those behind. The investigator closed his notebook, then walked close to the last footprint position the search team had marked. He sat down, observing carefully. With visibility almost completely blocked, Ava could have been standing in a dead zone for human eyes, a space the family couldn't see into even though it was only a few dozen meters away. At that distance, footsteps wouldn't be loud enough to overpower the wind, and any small movement could be completely hidden. If Ava stopped to check her direction or listen for something in the fog, no one behind could see that action. This matched the footprints showing she stopped right there, and matched the fact that the family called her name but got no response. In whiteout conditions, it's very possible Ava simply didn't hear them or couldn't pinpoint their location. The investigator rechecked wind direction based on the terrain map. Wind blowing diagonally from left to right in the direction Ava was moving. When the wind shifted, fog was pushed toward the trail along the exact axis. Ava was ahead of the family. This made the fog's role even clearer. Not only blocking view from behind, the fog also created a thick dividing layer, enough to cause disorientation in an instant. The investigator stood in the middle of the trail fork point, observing how fog slid across the ground, and realized that just a slight deviation in viewing angle would make the person ahead vanish completely from sight, even without leaving the trail. All these factors made the investigator begin seriously considering the 20 to 30 second period when the fog rushed in. In that brief span, Ava was alone, ahead of the rest of the family in a situation where visibility was restricted to almost zero. If she stopped, or turned left or right to find her way, she would still disappear from the family's view, even if only a few steps away. If she took 1 or 2 steps off the trail, that too would be unseen. That small distance became a gap no one behind could monitor. The investigator wrote in the scene report a completely technical description line. Whiteout occurred rapidly, blocking visibility for 20 to 30 seconds. At that moment, Ava was in a position no one could see. That note wasn't meant to propose a hypothesis. Just record the actual environmental conditions in the instant Ava left their sight. It was a short period but enough for her to vanish completely without anyone realizing what happened amid the fog strips rolling down from Logan Pass. After determining that the fog had completely obscured all movement in the short time Ava disappeared, The search team continued expanding the sweep range in directions where terrain might suggest Ava had gone if she left the trail. The investigator requested dividing the area into 3 concentric circles, sweeping each circle with gradually wider radius, starting from the stopping footprint position. Everyone hoped to find some sign, faint shoe marks, a broken branch, or even just a small piece of fabric. But for nearly an hour, everything remained silent like the fog layer that had just covered this place, until one search team member raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop. He was standing next to a flat patch of ground, not too large but deep enough in an area unrelated to the trail to make anyone pause. On the soil, lying neatly, as if someone had intentionally placed it there, was a thin, light blue scarf, the kind the Collins family said Ava often carried to tie her hair when taking photos or to protect from the sun. The investigator stepped closer, knelt down to observe carefully. Before him was not an item dragged or blown by wind, but one placed flat, untwisted, unfolded, without much dust or sand clinging like the surrounding ground. That was the first thing that made him pause longer than usual. If the scarf fell while Ava was moving, or if she fell, it should have folds, drag marks, or twists. But the scarf lay flat, unusually clean. He requested measuring the distance from where the scarf was found to the last footprint position. The measured distance was nearly 900 meters. Deep to the left of the trail, a terrain section never part of Ava's initial movement path. The investigator opened the map and calculated. With Ava's average moving speed throughout the hike based on prior data, she would need at least 20 to 25 minutes to reach that spot. But the Collins family confirmed Ava was out of sight for less than 5 minutes before they called the ranger. There was nothing reasonable for Ava to move that fast over rugged terrain, especially in thick fog conditions and with absolutely no footprints leading that way. Additionally, the ground where the scarf lay had no shoe prints at all, not women's shoe prints, nor men's. The soil surface remained relatively smooth, only slightly indented right under the scarf's edge, like an imprint from a heavy object of a few grams placed on it. No path to it, no path away. This made the scene contradict every normal theory about an item falling from a victim. The investigator requested lifting the scarf using proper method, with tweezers, paper underneath, no part touching human hands. When turning the scarf over, the underside was also clean to the point of having no significant soil bits, grass fragments, or sand grains stuck to it. The search team looked at each other. No one said anything, but everyone understood this didn't resemble a naturally dropped outdoor item. If the scarf fell from Ava while moving, it should have been rolled by wind, caught on rocks, covered in dust, and if Ava intentionally placed it down, her footprints should be around it. Yet there was nothing around. The investigator opened his notebook, wrote, "Scarf lying on clean ground. No movement traces around. No footprints to or from. Cannot be placed by victim herself." That note wasn't a conclusion, just a description of the scene's optical state, but it made everyone in the group feel something was off. A ranger suggested that the scarf might have fallen from an animal or been dragged by a bird, but the investigator immediately dismissed it after closely examining the scarf's edges. No tears, no bite marks, no clumped dirt or sand as would happen if dragged across the surface. Additionally, the location where the scarf was found was too far from the local animal's typical movement paths at that time. Even the wind would have struggled to carry the scarf there, as the path was blocked by clusters of thick bushes and large rocks. Everything pointed to the scarf not having drifted to that spot by any natural force. The investigator stood up, looked around the area once more. That patch of ground lay between 2 terrain sections, sparse forest to the left, large rocks, and dry ground to the right. There was no sign anyone had just stood there, yet the evidence item lay right in the middle of the open space, as if placed down by some hand. That didn't explain the cause, but it confirmed the scene was inconsistent with a natural chain of events. Another thing that made the investigator note it down immediately. The direction where the scarf was discovered deviated completely from the direction Ava had initially been heading, according to the family. If Ava got lost, she would have had to turn right from the trail branch. She could not have gone deep to the left, nearly 1 kilometer along a path with no trail. And even if she did get lost, she would still have left footprints, shoe marks, or at least trampled grass. But there was none of that. The scarf became the first piece of physical evidence, and right in that moment, the investigator understood that it didn't answer any questions. It only posed a new one. How did it end up in that position? He simply wrote in the scene report a rather dry but clear line. Scarf location inconsistent with victim's movement path. Cannot rule out possibility of another person moving the item. That was not a conclusive hypothesis, just a recognition of the scene's state at the time they found it. An item belonging to Ava Collins appearing in a place she herself could almost certainly not have reached on her own, in too short a time frame, and on ground too clean to believe it had simply fallen naturally. Right after Ava's scarf was collected, the investigator expanded the sweep range in the visitor center area to interview everyone who had been on the Hidden Lake Overlook Trail at the time Ava disappeared. Glacier National Park in midsummer is always crowded with visitors, and that offered one advantage. Many people might have unintentionally seen something they didn't realize was important. The investigator set up a temporary table right at the entrance, asking every group that had just finished their hike and passed by to stop briefly for a few basic questions. About an hour after the interview process began, a middle-aged woman said she might have seen Ava. She described a young girl with her hair tied high, wearing a bright-colored jacket, walking a bit faster than those around her, and with no one walking right beside her. She remembered that at that moment, fog from the valley was starting to spill upward, while sunlight was still filtering thinly from the west. She confirmed the girl she saw was walking alone, with no man nearby, no signs of being followed, or any unusual behavior. The investigator recorded it all fully, asked her to describe her own movement path again, the point where she saw Ava, and the relative time frame. According to her estimate, it was about 20 to 25 minutes before the Collins family called the ranger. That was the first witness statement, seemingly simple, consistent with the information the family provided. Ava usually walked faster than everyone. Being a few dozen meters ahead was normal. But the second statement that appeared just a moment later complicated the entire picture. A man in his about 30 years old, hiking with a group of friends, approached the interview table and said he was certain he had seen the girl everyone was looking for. When the investigator asked for a description, he said the girl was not walking alone. He clearly remembered the image of a young girl standing at the junction between two side branches, where the terrain opens into a small clearing overlooking the mountainside. More importantly, he said she wasn't standing alone but was standing next to a fairly tall man wearing dark-colored clothing and a hat covering half his face. He didn't have much time to observe because his friend's group was moving, but he confirmed that image stood out enough for him to notice. The fog had just rolled in, and the two people standing close together against the white fog background made their silhouettes contrast sharply. When asked whether the two seemed to know each other, he said he wasn't sure, but it felt like they weren't part of the same group. The two contradictory statements forced the investigator to reconstruct an image timeline, or more accurately, a timeline of subjective observations from each witness. The investigator spread the map out right on the table, asking each witness to mark the exact or approximate position where they had seen Ava. With the first statement, the position was marked about 300 meters northeast of the stopping footprint location. The second statement was completely off in the southwest direction, near the junction of the two side branches where the fog had thickened unusually. When combining the two statements on the time map, the investigator immediately realized the distance between the two positions was too great for Ava to cover in such a short time, especially in limited visibility conditions. One of the statements was wrong, or both were only describing what they thought they saw rather than what they actually saw. But the investigator still didn't rule out another possibility. Maybe the man in the second statement wasn't standing with Ava, but was just someone else who looked similar. However, when questioned closely, the male witness confirmed the girl he saw had features very similar to Ava's description, from hairstyle and jacket color to the small backpack worn in front. The next issue arose: the timing. The middle-aged woman said the girl was alone when sunlight was still clearly visible. The second man said he saw the scene when the fog was already thicker. Though the difference in fog density could vary by position on the trail, the investigator still had to note the inconsistency in the time frame each believed they had witnessed. This made establishing the final sequence of events before Ava vanished a complex puzzle because inconsistency between witness statements could derail the entire investigation direction. The investigator began reanalyzing from a different angle. Glacier National Park at peak season has hundreds of visitors on each trail. Bright-colored jackets, high-tied hair, and small front backpacks are not rare. Was it possible the female witness saw someone else, while the male witness saw the real Ava? Or vice versa? Or both saw two completely unrelated people? However, what made him pause the longest was the description of the man. Tall, dark-colored clothing, discreet behavior, standing in a spot few people notice. Those details didn't match any recorded visitor who had left the trail in that time frame. The investigator did not draw a conclusion, but recorded a preliminary observation. Cannot rule out the possibility that someone blended into the crowd on the trail. Need to re-interview the entire list of visitors who left the Hidden Lake Overlook area within 90 minutes around the time of disappearance. Those two conflicting statements, instead of helping narrow the search area, added yet another question. Was Ava walking alone, or was she approached by someone right in the moment the fog created a blind spot no one could see? The investigator still could not answer, but this was the first time they had to confront the possibility that the disappearance was not simply a wrong turn in the fog. When the two conflicting statements were recorded and placed on the map, the investigator understood that a more objective data source was needed for verification. Digital data. Glacier National Park is a place where cell phone signal is often weak, but not always completely lost. At a few points on the Hidden Lake Overlook Trail, especially near the Continental Divide, phones can sometimes still send a short ping before dropping into a dead zone. The investigator immediately asked the Collins family for access to Ava's iCloud account, all to review GPS data, photos, and every device movement before the time of disappearance. About 3 hours after starting the data retrieval, one anomaly immediately stood out. Amid the regular GPS points recording Ava moving in the same direction as her family, there was a single ping that deviated sharply to the southwest, more than 400 meters away from the location where the male witness said he had seen Ava. This ping lasted only 3 seconds, not strong enough to determine an extremely precise coordinate, but it clearly did not lie along her original path. The investigator zoomed in on the map. The ping appeared near a strip of sparse forest and slightly angled toward a gently sloping terrain section where very few visitors usually go. Could it just be signal noise? Could Ava's phone have been jolted, causing the GPS to jump to a wrong position? But the investigator remembered the detail in the male witness's statement. She was standing near the junction of two side trails, next to a tall man. When compared to the map, that location fell within the range of the anomalous ping. This was not enough to conclude that Ava had actually moved in that direction, but it was enough to force the investigation team to re-examine all initial hypotheses. Next, the investigator requested to review all the photos Ava had taken that morning. Ava carried a small chest-mounted camera, the kind the family commonly used, simple and easy to operate. The camera contained 34 photos, mostly landscape shots along the trail. But when cross-referencing timestamps, the investigator discovered a series of inconsistencies. Some photos in the middle of the sequence were time-stamped 7 minutes earlier than the ones before them, then immediately afterward jumped forward 12 minutes. Technically, timestamp discrepancies can occur if the battery is low, if the user manually changes the time, or if the device suffers a hard impact causing temporary memory reset. The family confirmed Ava had not touched the time settings at all, and the camera was in good condition before the trip. The investigator opened the EXIF data for each photo, a procedure commonly used to determine coordinates, time, sensor information, and file modifications. Here the anomaly became even clearer. Some photos had EXIF metadata, indicating they had been modified after capture. But no software was recorded as having opened the file. The EXIF only logged a crude change. Offset modified system time mismatch. This type of change often occurs when a device experiences severe mechanical shock, such as being dropped on the ground or struck against rock. But if Ava had dropped the camera, the family would certainly have known. and the camera body would surely show clear scratches. In reality, the camera had no cracks at all. Another detail that made the investigator pause longer. Two of the timestamp-shifted photos were pointed toward the southwest forest, exactly at the location of the strange GPS ping that had just appeared. The image quality was slightly blurry, possibly due to thickening fog or the photographer moving quickly. In the photos, there was only empty forest, no man visible. But the camera direction matched the direction described by the second witness. However, it was impossible to determine whether Ava intentionally photographed something or simply snapped randomly while turning. The investigator requested a digital forensics specialist from the National Park Service to assist with analysis. Was the EXIF metadata alteration due to a system error or external interference? After examination, the specialist gave a preliminary conclusion. The data showed no signs of editing by specialized software, but a few bytes in the EXIF file were logically inconsistent with time progression. This can happen when a camera is rapidly powered on and off in a short period, or when flash memory is disrupted before the file is fully written, a rare case, but not impossible if there was a hard impact. The investigator noted, "Cannot rule out the possibility that the device experienced severe shaking before the time of disappearance." But severe shaking where? On the flat trail? In thick fog? While Ava was alone? Or when someone approached her? Still no answer. Finally, the investigator placed three pieces of data side by side. 1. A single anomalous GPS ping, appearing exactly in the direction one witness said he saw Ava standing next to a tall man. 2. Unexplainable timestamp shifts in the camera photos, occurring right in the middle of the morning timeline. 3. Crude EXIF adjustment, inconsistent with normal device behavior. These three elements did not prove anything, but they forced the investigation to expand into the digital realm. If Ava did not move southwest on her own, then what caused her device to record a deviation? And if she did move there, why? Who was with her when it happened? Or did someone else briefly handle Ava's device for a very short time? There were still no answers. But for the first time since Ava disappeared, the investigator felt that the digital data was saying something the physical scene could not show. In the moment the fog obscured everything, there had been a small disturbance, a fluctuation recorded in the very device Ava was carrying. A sign too faint to understand fully, but clear enough to know it could not be ignored. When the digital data began revealing the first anomalies, the investigator returned to the map table to see whether the three initial hypotheses about Ava's disappearance still held up or not. From the start, the investigation team had been working with three possibilities: getting lost, an accident, or human involvement. But after the appearance of the deviated GPS ping, along with the time discrepancies in Ava's photos, all three hypotheses needed to be re-examined more carefully instead of relying only on initial intuition. First hypothesis: Ava got lost. This was the direction any missing person case in the mountains and forests had to consider first. However, every piece of data collected went against this hypothesis. Ava was experienced with outdoor activities, and although she had never hiked in Glacier National Park before, she had a habit of staying on the trail and not veering into dangerous areas. More importantly, Ava's footprints from the moment she walked ahead of her family consistently showed the same steady rhythm, with no sign she turned the wrong way or stepped into thick brush. There were no footprints leaving the trail in a random manner at all. The only off-trail footprints the investigator found were the ones leading to the abrupt stopping area, a highly suspicious spot. If Ava got lost, she would have continued walking in a confused state, but everything stopped completely at one exact point, with no further direction. Temporary conclusion: not enough data to believe Ava got lost on her own, and the scene did not reflect that either. Second hypothesis: accident. This was the possibility ruled out faster than the others. Glacier has countless cliffs, crevices, slippery areas, but the search team, on the very first day, had swept all the danger points near the Hidden Lake Overlook Trail. No slide marks, no rolling rocks, no signs of impact. If Ava slipped down a rocky slope, there would be very clear traces: scratches on the soil, broken bushes, dropped items. But the scene was completely clean. Even Ava's scarf, the first piece of physical evidence, lay too far away to relate to a random accident and was placed unusually on flat ground. These things made accident the weakest possibility. The investigation team noted no direct or indirect evidence that Ava had an accident. When hypotheses are eliminated by evidence, they gradually slide off the investigation table. Accident was one of them. Third hypothesis: human factor. This was the direction the investigator initially mentioned only as part of procedure, but more and more signs kept appearing that made it worth serious consideration. The conflicting witness statements, the GPS ping deviated to the southwest, the abnormal photo EXIF, and the scarf location with no path leading to it all, were pieces that could not be explained if relying only on random victim behavior. The investigator did not draw a conclusion but noted that the human intervention hypothesis, though late, was the only one not ruled out by actual evidence at the scene. The most important thing: analysis of Ava's footsteps on the trail section before she vanished. The terrain team, along with an invited tracking expert, examined the remaining footprints. Although the trail had many people on it, there were still some soft sections, enough to identify Ava's individual steps based on shoe size and stride length. When cross-referencing each segment, the expert noticed something the investigation team had not yet spotted. Ava's movement speed changed abruptly in the section near where the fog began thickening. From steady steps with a stable rhythm matching the family's description, Ava suddenly accelerated over about 20 meters, then slowed abruptly right before the fog completely covered the area. The acceleration and deceleration did not fit a single natural movement sequence. That change resembled a reaction. Either Ava heard a call, or she suddenly saw something that made her move unusually, or she was forced to change speed. With flat terrain at that moment, there was no natural reason for a person hiking normally to speed up for a few seconds then stop. The expert offered three possibilities, not as emotional guesses, but as behavioral analysis based on footprints. 1. Ava was called a familiar voice, or one clear enough to make her turn or veer. 2. Ava was led away, someone ahead, or signaling to make her change speed. 3. Ava was threatened, a case causing speed increase in reflex, then abrupt stop when controlled. No hypothesis was confirmed, but all three led to the same point: intervention by an external factor. The investigator circled the speed change footprint location on the map. This was the starting point of unusual behavior, and coincidentally, it was also the point right before Ava vanished in the fog. When two anomaly markers lay close together in time and space, the investigation team knew they were getting closer to a pattern that needed clarification. The three hypotheses were placed on the table again. Getting lost lacked sufficient data. Accident had no traces. Only the human factor remained unbroken by any evidence. The investigation direction began shifting focus. And from this moment, Ava's disappearance was no longer viewed as a simple trail mishap. It needed to be seen as a sequence of intentional actions by someone, somewhere, in the few minutes when the fog had covered the entire area. When the investigation focus had fully tilted toward the possibility of human intervention, the search team decided to expand the sweep range to areas they previously thought Ava could not have reached on her own in a short time. The goal now was no longer searching for a victim who got lost, but checking whether any evidence had been moved, intentionally left, or discarded to mislead. It was during this expanded sweep that three pieces of evidence appeared in three completely separate locations, and when placed side by side, they forced the investigator to change the entire view of the case. The first piece of evidence was found on the morning of the second day after Ava vanished: her small backpack. There was nothing particularly special about the discovery location, but the condition of the backpack was what made the investigation team focus fully. It was spotted by an assistant ranger observing the edge of the sparse forest, where branches spread out and a patch of bright-colored fabric was caught on tree bark. When approaching closer, they realized it was the strap of Ava's backpack, torn nearly in half, as if forcefully pulled off the wearer's shoulder. The backpack was lying on the ground, right under the tree trunk, but there were no new footprints around it. This created a paradox. If Ava dropped the backpack, there should have been footprints from her or someone else approaching that spot. And if the backpack was thrown, the throwing direction and trajectory should have left marks or scratches on the tree trunk. but the backpack strap was caught in a sideways pulling manner, inconsistent with the motion of being thrown from a distance. The investigator closely examined the tear edges. The tear was not from natural wear, but from a strong jerk, with the fabric torn into long strands, indicating the puller used force greater than what Ava herself could generate in a normal situation. Inside the backpack, a few small items remained: a water bottle, tissues, thin gloves, no phone. There were also no signs that the backpack had been roughly rummaged from inside. The investigator noted, external force impact, no signs of natural drop, no related footprints. The second piece of evidence was found when the search team reswept the area near the deviated GPS ping they had detected from Ava's phone data. A young ranger following a dense forest path suddenly stopped when he saw a small object reflecting light. It was a SIM card, small, thin, and rarely falls out of a phone unless manually removed. When picked up, they discovered the SIM card was slightly bent, as if someone had applied force to create a crack on the edge. The SIM card location was nearly 1 kilometer from the backpack. There was no way to explain Ava dropping the backpack at one point and the SIM card at another so far away in the same time frame. Immediately, the investigator requested cordoning off the SIM card location and preserving the surrounding ground for analysis. But just like with the backpack, there were no footprints, slide marks, or any signs someone had lingered in that area. The SIM card was too small for wind to blow it that far, especially since it was bent, increasing weight on one side. No phone was nearby, nor any sign the SIM fell from an impact. The investigator's temporary conclusion: SIM manually removed, not naturally fallen. Location inconsistent with victim's movement path. The third piece of evidence was what made the entire investigation team sit in silence for a few seconds when presented: a partially burned length of paracord. The cord was found in a clearing more than 2 kilometers from both previous locations, lying near the base of a slope leading down to fractured rock terrain. Paracord is an extremely common survival rope in outdoor activities, but Ava was not carrying this type of cord on the hike. The family confirmed that. When the ranger picked it up, one end was charred black and curled, as if recently burned with a small flame. Not a spreading fire, not a wildfire, but deliberate burning. Especially, the remaining section had a very distinct burnt smell, like incompletely burned plastic, indicating the burning had not happened too long ago. The investigator considered one possibility: someone burned the cord to create smoke signal, but the cord's location was in a low area, with no observational advantage, and no traces anyone who burned it stayed there long. And if someone used the cord to tie something, that something was no longer at the scene. When the investigator placed the 3 pieces of evidence on the same table and marked their locations on the map, a clear pattern emerged. The backpack, nearly 1 kilometer from the SIM card. The SIM card, more than 2 kilometers from the partially burned paracord. All 3 items not lying along any single logical movement path. None of the items showing signs of being dropped or carried by nature. Most importantly, none of the evidence was in an area Ava could have reached on her own within the time frame she disappeared. The scattering of the evidence suggested one common point: they did not appear in one place, but were dispersed in an unnatural pattern. The investigator wrote in the report, "Must consider possibility evidence was moved by one or more individuals. No random phenomenon reasonably explains it." This reinforced what the investigation team had begun to accept. What happened to Ava Collins was not a random trail mishap in Glacier. 3 pieces of evidence, 3 locations, 3 abnormal characteristics, all pointing to the same assessment. Human hands intervened, before or after the moment Ava vanished. And the fog period that obscured the entire trail was likely the window where everything began. After the 3 pieces of evidence were found in scattered and abnormal locations, the investigator knew they needed to re-examine all imagery data the National Park Service collected from landscape cameras along the trail. Glacier does not have dense surveillance like a city, but at major trail junctions, several solar-powered cameras are installed for managing visitor volume and monitoring environmental conditions. The tech team extracted data from the day Ava disappeared, especially the period before and after the fog rolled down Hidden Lake Overlook. Among hundreds of passers-by, one figure stood out more than usual. A tall, lean man carrying a large camera backpack. The camera log noted the registered trail permit name as Liam Drake, 32 years old, a landscape photographer from Montana. Liam appeared in at least 4 cameras, moving from Logan Pass toward Hidden Lake Overlook, the same route the Collins family took. The investigator immediately cross-referenced Liam's images with the male witness statement, the one who said he saw Ava standing next to a tall man in dark clothing. Liam was wearing a charcoal jacket and a hooded hat. When zooming in on camera close-ups, the build and clothing completely matched the description. Though it could not be confirmed as the exact person the witness saw, the match provided strong enough reason for the investigator to put Liam on the interview list. Even more noteworthy appeared when the tech team built Liam's movement timeline. Based on the times he appeared in each camera and the average trail speed, Liam's path should have been continuous. But when cross-referencing timestamps, the investigator discovered a nearly 20-minute gap, the period when Liam should have appeared at the third camera on the trail, but was nowhere to be seen. No data showed camera malfunction. No evidence Liam took a side path. Just one fact: he disappeared from the system for 20 minutes, exactly when the fog was thickest, and exactly when Ava vanished. To verify, the investigator contacted the search team to recheck the area near the third camera location. That was close to the side branch where the male witness said he saw Ava. No new traces were found, but the timeline gap made all the coincidences hard to ignore. Attention grew even more when another ranger, the one in charge of the gear check station before visitors enter the trail, reported that Liam was carrying a lot of photography equipment and a survival kit bag. In that bag, paracord was recorded, the very common survival rope type. When the investigator reviewed the color, size, and brand of paracord Liam carried, they noticed it was identical to the partially burned cord found at the third location. It was impossible to attribute anything based on that, because paracord is a common item, thousands of visitors could use it. But this was the first time the investigation had a specific item matching physical evidence from the scene. Liam was invited to the visitor center for a voluntary interview. He arrived without objection, calm and cooperative. When asked if he had seen Ava, Liam answered immediately, "No, I don't know who she is. I didn't encounter her on the trail." He said that most of the time he stopped to take photos because the fog created very special light effects. When the investigator asked about the 20-minute gap in the timeline, Liam explained simply, "I left the main trail to photograph the rocky edge area. The camera's not seeing me as normal." The investigator continued asking about the partially burned paracord section. Liam confirmed the paracord he carried was still intact in his backpack, even willing to let the ranger check. When opening the backpack, the coil was still neatly in the side pocket, uncut and unburned. That forced the investigator to note that although Liam used the same type of cord as the evidence, there was no proof his cord was used in the event related to Ava. But the coincidences did not stop there. When reviewing Liam's camera data, the investigator saw that most photos were just landscapes. But there was a series of photos missing timestamps, a condition similar to the photos in Ava's camera. The digital forensic specialist explained that many cameras in cold, high humidity, unstable weather areas can collectively experience time errors, but it was also impossible to rule out the possibility that Liam was in the same area and same environmental conditions as Ava at that moment. The investigator recorded the following points in the temporary suspect file. Liam Drake appeared near the time Ava vanished. There was a 20-minute gap in his movement timeline. He used paracord matching the found sample. Statement denying meeting Ava, but no data fully excluding it. However, points inconsistent with an accusation hypothesis also had to be clearly noted. No DNA traces, footprints, or evidence directly linking Liam to the scene. The paracord he carried was intact. His camera contained no images recording Ava. The interview ended without enough evidence to consider Liam a formal suspect, but he became the first person on the list needing monitoring, because too many points intersected between his timeline and the moment Ava disappeared. The investigator left the interview room with one final note: need to verify Liam's 20-minute journey with other data. If not, this gap is a critical link in the case. For the 2 weeks following the Liam Drake interview, the NPS and Flathead County investigation team expanded every possible direction. They returned to the scene multiple times, sweeping every meter of ground along the route where the backpack, SIM card, and partially burned paracord were found. They used thermal scanners, long-range drones, infrared cameras, even enlisted animal tracking experts to analyze small surface terrain disturbances. But nothing new emerged. No drag marks, no struggle signs, no clear second set of footprints beyond those mixed by hundreds of visitors. No scent, no fabric fibers, no detail strong enough to turn speculation into evidence. The investigator returned to each piece of evidence, cross-referencing them from a legal perspective. The torn backpack? No foreign DNA. No fingerprints. No glove residue marks. The tear could be from strong pulling force, but it could not be proven as human force or force from getting caught on branches. The bent SIM card? No fingerprints collected. Could not prove who removed it from the phone. Partially burned paracord? Analysis showed it was a common type, without unique features to trace to a user. The cord's location was far from the trail but had no footprints leading to it, all only showing the presence of the item, not who brought it there. When reviewing all witness statements again, the investigator grew even more perplexed. The woman insisted she saw Ava walking alone. The man said he saw her standing next to someone. No one could describe a face or any clear identifying features. No one saw suspicious behavior. No statement was certain enough to serve as a foundation piece for the file. The two testimonies contradicted each other to the point that both could be right or both wrong. And Liam? The investigator reviewed his file once more. No criminal record. No history of violent behavior. No evidence he contacted Ava. Camera data contained no images of her. Paracord traces in his backpack were intact, and although the 20-minute timeline gap was a detail the investigator could not ignore, it remained just a gap, not proof of crime. It was impossible to accuse someone based on inference. Impossible to establish guilt based on coincidence. When an investigation relies on possibility without facts, it cannot stand before any level of review. The case file was later transferred to the county prosecutor's office to consider opening a formal suspect file. Their returned conclusion was brief but heavy. No legal basis to charge Liam Drake or any other individual, nor evidence confirming criminal elements. All data existed in fragmented form, raising more questions than providing answers. A closed-door meeting was held. The investigator presented the entire chain of events again, from the abrupt stopping footprints to the scattered evidence, from the deviated GPS ping to the unclear points in witness statements. But at the end, he had to admit, we cannot prove where Ava went after the moment the fog obscured her, cannot trace the last person to meet her, cannot determine the cause of disappearance, cannot establish a tight enough sequence of events to open a criminal file. And with that statement, the case entered a phase no investigator wants to touch. The file was temporarily closed. They don't call it an end. Glacier doesn't end missing persons cases. It just shifts them to a different status. Cold case. That means the case still exists, but there are no new leads, no viable investigation directions, no new witnesses, and no physical evidence with legal value. Everything is sealed, archived, waiting for a day when something, a bone fragment, a device emerging from melting ice, a new statement, or a technology not yet invented might breathe life back into it. The investigator wrote the final line in the report. We know Ava Collins vanished. We know the time. We know what she left behind. But we don't know the most important thing. Who or what was behind the 90-second gap that the fog concealed? The case officially went cold, and Glacier kept its secret. Ava Collins's disappearance was officially classified as a cold case, but that didn't mean everything stopped. Glacier National Park has an unspoken rule. Winter hides everything, summer returns part of the truth. When the snow began melting in the second year after Ava vanished, water from the mountainsides poured down, making many previously inaccessible areas easier to observe. That was also when a veteran ranger, checking the route near Reynolds Creek, noticed what he described as not matching the familiar picture. Deep in the sparse forest southeast of Hidden Lake, There was an old cabin from the 1940s originally built as a rest station for patrol staff, then abandoned for nearly 30 years. The cabin was almost never visited, partly because the access path was difficult, partly because the surrounding area was often closed when snow was deep. But in early June, when the last snow layer receded, the ranger saw something unusual. Fresh signs of the door being opened. The rotten wooden hinges of the cabin were normally so stiff they only moved when strong wind slammed into them. But now the door gap was unnaturally ajar, with the wood edge showing marks of being forced with a hard object. The whole scene gave the feeling that someone very recently had tried to push the door to get inside. He called the NPS investigator who had followed Ava's case from the beginning. Less than an hour later, the cabin became the first new scene examination site since the file went cold. The investigator approached the door, put on gloves, bent close. The rotten wood had fresh cracks. Wood fibers split in the direction of being forced open from outside to inside. Strangely, there were no clear footprints outside the cabin, possibly due to dry leaf cover or rain blurring them, but the investigator still noted that the ground surface provided no valuable information. Inside the cabin there were only three things: a broken bench, an old wooden table, and a dirt floor mixed with ash dust from the long-ago fireplace. Nothing special, until the investigator shone a light in the corner near the small window. On the floor, there was a streak darker than the surroundings, the surface recently turned over. The accompanying ranger thought it could be an animal digging for food, but when the investigator used a small stick to separate the thin soil layer, he discovered the soil here was moister, as if recently disturbed while the weather was still cold. Although the cabin contained no items directly related to Ava, the investigator still requested soil samples from 3 points: under the door, near the window, and along the north wall edge. He didn't expect much because an abandoned cabin could contain hundreds of soil types, from wind, animals, or occasional visitors. But the surprising truth lay in the next analysis step. 10 days later, the lab reported preliminary results. The soil samples collected at the cabin had mineral characteristics matching the microsoil, adhering to the underside of Ava's scarf that they had collected in the early days of the investigation. Soil in the Hidden Lake Overlook area is very rich in silica and decomposed granite, while soil at Reynolds Creek contains old volcanic ash, mixed with more distinctive basalt components. Ava's scarf previously had only 2 soil types, one from the main trail and microsoil of undetermined source. Now, the cabin provided an answer. The soil on the scarf was identified as belonging to the mineral group similar to Reynolds Creek soil more than any other area on the map. This forced the investigation team to re-examine all hypotheses. The cabin was nearly 4 kilometers, as the crow flies from where Ava disappeared. But following forest and slope terrain, the distance could reach 6 or 7 kilometers. No one could walk from Hidden Lake to Reynolds Creek in a short time, especially in thick fog and difficult terrain. This raised a big question. How did soil from the cabin appear on Ava's evidence? The investigator proposed 2 possibilities. 1. Ava had been at the cabin, an unlikely scenario given the initial timeline where she vanished in just minutes. 2. Someone had been to the cabin after contact with Ava or her belongings and left indirect traces. Both possibilities could not be verified immediately. But the cabin now became the new focus of the investigation, no longer an anonymous abandoned structure in the forest. It was the first location after many months showing a real physical match, not subjective statements, not hypotheses. The investigator returned to the cabin once more for deeper examination. This time they closely inspected walls, under the table, wood crevices, no fabric fibers, hair, or any biological signs were found. But one detail caught attention. Inside the old fireplace there was a new layer of ash, fine ash, gray-white, completely different from the hard black ash accumulated over years. When sampled, the burn expert determined the ash could originate from synthetic material, not ordinary wood in the area. This was not enough to confirm it belonged to Ava or anyone else, but it indicated the cabin had been used after Ava disappeared. Though no direct evidence was found, the cabin was no longer a quiet spot forgotten by time. It became an intersection point between Ava's evidence and a mysterious activity occurring after the day she vanished. The investigator wrote the final line in the report. Reynolds Creek cabin does not answer the question. But it poses a new question, and that is the first sign the case is not over. The appearance of the Reynolds Creek cabin as an anomaly forced the investigator to revisit all the digital data that had previously been deemed unusable. In the cold case file, there was a small entry: Ava's camera, corrupted files, unrecoverable. That was the conclusion from the tech division in the first year. The photos had corrupted EXIF, many files at 0 bytes, some images displaying corrupted header. When the case was officially moved to cold status, the camera data was stored in the evidence vault. But now, with the cabin showing fresh ash, cabin soil matching the sample on the scarf, and the timeline suggesting Ava might have encountered a stranger in the fog, the investigator requested another recovery attempt, this time with new technology and the persistence the case had not had before. The digital forensics team from NPS collaborated with the Montana Crime Analysis Lab, opening each file manually, reconstructing photo headers by reading every remaining byte. Half the photos still could not be recovered. But the final 4 files, those previously considered completely corrupted, unexpectedly showed signals. When the first image was fully recovered, the entire room fell silent for a few seconds. It was Ava, standing on a trail section with the distinctive rock formation behind her, exactly in the area where the second witness said he had seen her. Ava's face was slightly turned toward the camera, but what caught the investigator's attention was not her expression but the direction of her gaze. She wasn't looking at the scenery. She also wasn't looking straight into the camera, as she did when taking selfies. Ava was turning her head to look behind her, her eyes not showing surprise or delight like in previous photos, but something harder to define: mild tension, alertness, as if she had just heard someone call her. The second photo, partially recovered, was blurrier. The upper half of the frame was noisy, but the lower half showed Ava standing off to one side of the trail, hand holding a backpack strap. The important detail was at the right edge of the photo, a faint silhouette of a man, just a dark shape, face unclear, but tall, upright posture, slightly leaning toward Ava. The EXIF timestamp of the photo, though offset, fell within the exact period when the fog began rolling in. The third photo made everything clearer, though only 60% of the image was recovered. The portrait section of the man behind Ava had less noise. The face could not be identified, but body proportions could be measured based on surrounding objects. Height approximately 6 feet. The investigator immediately cross-referenced with the male witness description: a tall man, dark clothing. This was the first time digital data and witness testimony matched significantly. The fourth photo was the most crucial piece, though lowest quality. A figure standing about 3 to 4 steps from Ava, right before the fog covered the entire frame. The dark clothing, upright stance, and shadow cast on the rock behind matched all previous descriptions. When enlarging the shadow area, the tech specialist noticed one detail. The left shoulder appeared broader than the right, as if the jacket was shifted or he was carrying something under his arm. Though not enough for identification, it became a distinctive marker that could be compared to suspect data if one was found later. The investigator reviewed all 4 photos in recovery order. Photo 1, Ava turning her head to look. Photo 2, silhouette appearing at the frame edge. Photo 3, tall figure beside her. Photo 4, distance between Ava and the man clearly reduced. None of the photos showed physical contact. None showed criminal behavior. But all showed one thing: Ava was not alone in those final minutes. Her turning her head was not random behavior. The appearance of the silhouette could not be a technical coincidence, and the camera timeline recording thick fog right as the images faded showed the device had captured the very last moments before she vanished. The investigator had to do what he had not been able to do in the first 2 years: place the 4 recovered photos alongside the timeline. When he did, a series of open questions emerged. Who was the man standing near Ava? Was he connected to Reynolds Creek cabin? Was he connected to the scattered evidence locations? Was Liam's 20-minute gap related or completely independent? The camera data did not answer everything, but it answered the minimum the case had lacked for 2 years: Ava had encountered a man before she vanished, and that man was about 6 feet tall, exactly as described, which previously no one believed had enough basis. The investigator wrote the final line of the report. Ava's camera did not malfunction randomly. It stopped right when the fog obscured everything, and before stopping, it recorded the presence of a man we must find at all costs. After the recovered data from Ava's camera revealed the presence of a figure about 6 feet tall standing near her in the fog, the investigator still had no direct sign of Ava's location after she disappeared. However, Glacier National Park is not just quiet mountains and forests. The Hidden Lake area and surrounding forest branches were equipped with several trail cameras set up for wildlife research, monitoring deer, elk, grizzly bears, and native species. Data from these cameras is usually rarely reviewed, but in the second year after Ava's disappearance, the investigation team decided to review all archived videos from the day she went missing, especially cameras near the Reynolds Creek route and less traveled slopes. When reviewing the sequential videos, one camera near a sparse forest patch west of Reynolds Creek recorded an unusual image. The image, though noisy and blurry due to low light and fog, showed a small figure walking with a limp along a faint trail with no human footprints. The tech team slowed the video, increased contrast, and applied noise filters. They recognized the uneven gait. Left leg lifted higher, right leg slightly limping, arms extended naturally, similar to balancing on slippery terrain. The entire walk was small, light, but very distinctive. The investigator realized that this gait had distinctive characteristics matching Ava. Short stride distance, arm and shoulder movements, consistent with a 17-year-old girl's walk, and the way of moving showing the person was trying to maintain balance on complex terrain. They proceeded with gait analysis, a technique comparing walking patterns to known victim samples. Using the recovered photos from Ava's camera, along with video from the main trail and footprint analysis from data before she vanished, the expert gave results. 70% match with Ava's gait. This rate was high enough to confirm that the person recorded by the camera was highly likely Ava, or at least someone with the same gait and height. The video lasted about 15 seconds, showing the person walking from the direction of the abandoned cabin toward the mountainside, going deeper into the sparse forest and gradually disappearing into the fog layer. The investigation team analyzed every frame, the person's brown hair, gait, even the way they carried the backpack in front, all matched Ava. There was no silhouette of the tall man beside her, meaning this was a moment she was walking alone. But it still did not explain the initial disappearance on the trail. What particularly shocked the entire team was the recording timestamp. The video was captured by the wildlife camera many weeks after Ava vanished. If this was truly her, it meant Ava was not severely injured or dead right after the fog, as many previous hypotheses suggested. She had survived in the remote mountain forest area, at least for a few weeks. That time period opened an entirely new investigation direction. Ava might still be alive, but trapped or moving in an isolated area, and this explained why the scattered evidence appeared without direct signs of her. The investigator immediately compared the person's position in the video with the Reynolds Creek cabin location, where soil matched Ava's scarf. When overlaying the map, they realized the route the person in the video took was almost parallel and approaching the cabin. This was the first time remote camera data, evidence, and terrain began having a direct link. Though not definitive, it created a feasible movement pattern. Ava might have moved toward the cabin or the nearby forest area, where soil and scarf matched. The tech team continued analysis. The limping steps and gradually slowing pace, consistent with malnutrition, fatigue, or minor injury. The camera only captured gait, no audio. But low light and fog were enough to notice some natural movements. The person's hands always moving to maintain balance, looking down at the terrain ahead, occasionally stopping to observe surroundings. All indicated a person still alert, knowing how to move in mountains and forests, and capable of self-protection for an extended period. The investigator cross-referenced gait analysis results with physical scene data, stride distance, estimated height, balanced walk on sloped terrain, and limping signs. Everything aligned with high probability that the person in the video was Ava. Not absolute, but enough for the investigation team to completely change their view of the case. From a disappearance with accident or attack hypotheses, now possibly a survivor hiding in the forest, the investigation team noted the final detail. Ava's path gradually vanished into the fog, heading toward a rarely visited area. This was also the time when the scattered evidence backpack, SIM card, paracord could be explained. Not all happening at once, but spread out during her movement, over many weeks, or indirectly moved by natural environment and external activity. The wildlife camera, originally only for ecological research, became the first visual evidence source confirming the possibility Ava was alive after the disappearance day. The investigator wrote in the scene report, "Wildlife video records limping gait. Estimated height about 6 feet. Gait analysis 70% match with Ava Collins. Moment recorded many weeks after disappearance. Day indicates possibility victim still alive and moving in remote forest area. No signs of severe injury in imagery. Movement position near Reynolds Creek cabin, where previous evidence matched soil on victim's scarf. The investigation team sat together, reviewing the frames over and over, calculating distances, movement speed, and estimated time. This was the first time since Ava vanished that they had new visual data strong enough to change the entire investigation direction and open hope that the victim was still alive. The appearance of the figure in the fog became a crucial sign in the search process. The investigation team returned to Reynolds Creek cabin on a morning when fog still lingered on the tree canopies, preparing for a comprehensive examination of every square meter inside the cabin. The dirt floor, long abandoned and covered in dry leaves from many years, was scanned with infrared equipment, technically analyzing every point. Initial steps focused on the area near the old fireplace, where burn ash remained and showed light disturbance. On the floor appeared clear footprints, different from the first examination. One set of small female footprints, even and regular, and one set of larger male footprints, solid and firm, circling the cabin, along the north wall edge, sweeping through the fireplace corner and west window frame. Stride distance, imprint depth, and groove shape allowed the expert to estimate the female about 17 to 18 years old, and the male about 6 feet tall. Strong pressure, reflecting adult weight and muscle. Both footprint sets stopped at certain points, appearing to stand still observing or handling surrounding objects, with no signs of multiple passes or excessive soil disturbance. The team collected scattered hair fibers around the fireplace corner and near the west window. One long, straight brown hair was secured in a special preservation bag. DNA lab determined this hair matched 80% with Ava Collins' sample, confirming her direct presence at the cabin. A second hair, darker brown and thicker, did not match any sample from Ava or Liam Drake, appearing near the north floor, indicating at least a second person present in the cabin. This hair was not next to the male footprints, but in a position approaching the fireplace and window, where the male steps also passed. The old wood surfaces of the cabin were checked for fingerprints. On the doorframe and fireplace ledge, technicians discovered fingerprints with pine resin residue, resin still sticky in the ridge patterns. These fingerprints were large, clear, not matching Liam Drake, showing an adult with strong hand force. Fingerprint positions were high, near surfaces an average person would reach up to grasp, indicating someone standing upright, handling surrounding objects or observing outside the cabin. The fingerprints combined with the unknown hair showed the presence of a second individual, present with Ava or interacting with the cabin environment. The analysis team closely examined the footprint sets. The female footprints appeared around the fireplace, near the window, and part of the east floor, corresponding to the positions where Ava's hair fell. The stride distance was even, the walking rhythm unchanged, indicating Ava moved in a balanced way, without hurry. Some footprints stopped, with toes lifted higher than normal, as if she bent down to pick up or place something. The male footprints ran parallel to part of the female path, stopping near the fireplace, on thick decayed leaf ground, with no continuing footprints nearby, showing this person stood still for a long time, or worked on the cabin, without much movement. The distance between footprints and hair positions allowed, creating an evidence distribution diagram. The female footprints linked to Ava's fallen hair, the male footprints to the resin sticky fingerprints, the stopping points all matching positions previously noted during cabin scans. The footprints and evidence positions clearly showed direction. Ava walked from the door into the cabin, stopped at the fireplace, some steps headed toward the west window, while the man walked from the fireplace toward the north floor, near the window. The footprints and evidence formed an indirect interaction chain with each other, showing operations or movement inside the cabin. The team collected soil samples at the female and male footprint positions, at the fireplace and around the window, to compare with soil on Ava's scarf and the scattered evidence outside the trail. Preliminary results showed soil at the female points matched the scarf soil, confirming Ava had contact and moved inside the cabin, while soil around the male footprints was also distinctly different from typical trail soil, matching the sparse forest area near Reynolds Creek where the cabin is located. Additionally, the team checked other wood surfaces, the cabin floor, and the old wooden table. No items belonging to Ava or the man were found. No fabric traces, cord, or other personal items. What remained were only footprints, hair fibers, and resin sticky fingerprints, but enough to determine the cabin scene had the presence of Ava and an unidentified male. The distance, position, and direction of the footprints, along with evidence distribution, indicated active movement and operations inside the cabin, not random disturbance from wind, animals, or accident. The investigator remeasured all footprints, precisely marked them on the cabin map, created an internal route diagram, female footprints matching Ava's fallen hair, male footprints matching resin sticky fingerprint positions, stopping points all matching the fireplace and window. This position also aligned with the direction of the wildlife camera recording the small limping figure a few weeks after disappearance, creating a link between the cabin scene, physical data, and remote observation. The team photographed the entire scene with different lighting, 3D scanned every corner to record details for future cross-referencing. Each footprint, hair, fiber, and fingerprint was numbered, measured for size, stride distance, depth, estimated pressure force. All data entered into the digital cold case file. These parameters allowed comparative analysis with camera data, GPS, and scattered trail evidence, forming a physical picture of interactions at the cabin. The Reynolds Creek cabin file recorded 3 key factors: female footprints consistent with Ava, male footprints not matching Liam Drake, resin sticky fingerprints on wood belonging to no known file, and unknown hair, all in the same area, with specific stopping points and movement directions, confirming the cabin as a place Ava was present, and an unidentified male interacted with the scene. Cabin data provided physical basis to connect with scattered trail evidence, digital data from the camera and wildlife camera. The cabin became the only stored physical interaction site, recording traces of Ava with the strange man. No signs of natural disturbance. All traces showed presence and active operations. 4 years passed since the day Ava Collins vanished, Glacier National Park still retaining its characteristic silence, with narrow mountain slopes, deep valleys, and sudden fog. During that time, all efforts from search teams and investigators focused on Reynolds Creek cabin, scattered trail evidence, GPS data, and wildlife camera. But Ava was still not found. In the 4th summer, a group of 3 hikers passing through the area near the west slope of Reynolds Creek, on a survey of a rarely used route, suddenly spotted a figure in the sparse forest below a rocky loose slope section. The person was squatting beside a boulder, body trembling, hair tangled, clothes torn and mud-covered, clearly in an exhausted state, but still alive. The hikers immediately approached, called out, and confirmed right away that this was Ava Collins. She was too tired to stand, eyes dull. But when recognizing the calls, she slightly shook her head, trying to identify the people around her. The hikers quickly contacted rescue teams, using satellite radio and GPS to pinpoint the exact location. The rescue team arrived after about 20 minutes, and for the first time in 4 years, Ava was placed in safe arms, carried out of the sparse forest and onto a wider path. She could barely walk without support, skin pale, body trembling from hunger, dehydration, and lack of sleep. Everyone provided water, light food, and a temporary warming blanket, while immediately contacting Glacier National Park medical team for reception and care. After stabilizing somewhat, Ava began speaking short sentences, but each word carried weight and important meaning. I ran from one person. The first statement made the investigator present at the scene note carefully. Immediately, they understood this was direct confirmation of at least one figure Ava encountered during her disappearance. The second sentence, Ava continued, "Another person helped me." This revealed that she did not move through the forest alone, but had interaction, support, or rescue from another individual, the second person that previous indirect evidence, footprints, and fingerprints at the cabin had suggested. The third sentence, mysterious but most important, Ava said, "I don't know which of the two wanted me to live." These words immediately changed the entire view of the case. From cabin data, scattered evidence, digital data, and wildlife camera, now all pieces fit into a clearer picture. Ava had faced two individuals, one threatening, one supporting, and she could not clearly determine who truly helped her survive. The fog period, cabin location, scattered evidence, and wildlife video all fit this model. The investigator immediately compared Ava's direct statements with footprints, evidence, and digital data. Female footprints at the cabin, resin sticky fingerprints, and unknown hair, along with scattered evidence positions, were now understood as interactions with both figures. They analyzed that when Ava was in the cabin, she might have encountered the strange man, as fingerprints on the window frame and partially burned paracord suggested, while the second person, leaving no direct traces, might have helped her out of the cabin, assisting her movement through sparse forest areas, exactly where the wildlife camera recorded the small limping figure. The rescue team recorded every word Ava said, while supporting her along the trail back to safety. During movement, the investigator asked additional small details about directions, carried items, and memory fragments of the forest area. Ava only repeated, "I don't know which of the two wanted me to live." They could not press her for more, as her mental and physical state was still very weak. However, these three sentences became the most important basis, linking all previous evidence into a reasonable model. Ava's disappearance was not simply an accident or a single individual. She had interacted with two different people in a chain of events lasting many weeks. When Ava was loaded onto the rescue vehicle, the investigator reswept the entire scene diagram. Distance between cabin and scattered evidence positions, female and male footprints, Ava's hair, SIM card, and backpack. Suddenly, all matched Ava's three-sentence statement. They calculated movement, distance, and time, realizing Ava moved partly with support from the second person, but still had to walk alone in many areas, matching the limping gait previously recorded by the wildlife camera. Previous confusing stopping points and evidence now made sense. Backpack, paracord, SIM card, hair, footprints, fingerprints, all linked to Ava's survival journey. In the cabin, previously recorded evidence and footprints were now redefined. Female footprints were Ava's, male footprints were the first person's. Resin sticky fingerprints belonged to this man. The second person left no clear traces, but had appeared in the moment of rescue and moving Ava away from dangerous areas. The fog period, limping and gait analysis, deviated GPS data, and scattered evidence were all explained in the context of two individuals' interactions with Ava. After Ava was brought to safety, medical and rescue teams continued health checks. She was tired, weakened, but without severe injury. No signs of serious trauma beyond fatigue and dehydration. Ava received full medical care, and records of her statements were secured for the ongoing investigation. Results from the scene, digital data, cabin evidence, wildlife camera, and Ava's direct statements matched at one key point: two figures directly involved in Ava's survival, one threatening or endangering, and one supporting movement, helping her endure remote mountain forest areas and long isolation. This event chain explained all previous phenomena: abrupt stopping footprints, scattered evidence, errors in GPS and camera, partially burned paracord, and the limping steps recorded by the wildlife camera. From the moment Ava was found, All the pieces from the past 4 years began falling into reasonable places. Reynolds Creek cabin, scattered trail evidence, GPS and camera data, footprints and hair, witness statements, and now Ava's direct words all matched into a chain of events. Ava survived thanks to interactions with two different individuals and moved through the remote forest, while some evidence and traces remained for the investigation team to confirm. After Ava was brought to safety, the investigator conducted a cognitive interview, a method to help victims reconstruct fragmented memories dominated by stress over weeks or years. Ava was still weakened but could focus for a few minutes at a time. The interview began with basic questions about events around the time she vanished, where she was, how she felt then, and what she heard, saw, or smelled. Ava took a deep breath, eyes looking down at the table, trying to recall, and gradually memory fragments appeared as scattered images and sounds. She remembered the sound of a lighter softly clicking, a small but clear sound. This sound was not from the cabin fireplace, but from a small object, almost at low level relative to her path. This suggested the possibility someone flicked a lighter, perhaps to illuminate or perform some action. Next, Ava remembered the mint smell, a strong scent spreading in the air, making her aware of a distinctive individual's presence. She said, "The smell, very clear. Mint, very strong, completely different from the forest smell." This scent was distinctive enough to compare with previously identified individuals. Ava continued describing the creaking cabin door sound when she was brought inside or when someone opened it. This sound repeated 2 or 3 times in her memory, while she saw flashlight beams flashing into her face, causing a feeling of surprise and having to bow or avoid the light. Her memories were fragmented, not in continuous order, but enough for the investigation team to identify physical details. Cabin door opened, light focused on Ava's face, lighter sound and mint smell, all appearing at the same time as previously collected cabin evidence and footprints. The investigator immediately compared details with information about Liam Drake. They knew Liam did not use mint, and in previous interviews he also confirmed not smoking or using any mint-related products. This helped rule him out as the source of the mint smell Ava remembered. This correlation, combined with cabin evidence and unidentified male footprints, reinforced the assessment that there was a second individual directly involved in the events Ava experienced, different from Liam. Ava continued recounting other small details she still remembered. Pressure feeling on her arm and shoulder, as if held or guided during movement. Cold and slightly damp cabin floor surface when she stood near the fireplace and window. Flashlight movements shining through door cracks, forcing her to adjust steps and position to avoid direct light. Each small detail matched previously collected physical traces. Ava's hair fibers, female footprints, resin sticky fingerprints, and scattered evidence around the cabin. During the cognitive interview, Ava repeated many times that memories were shattered. Lighter sound might appear before or after flashlight. Mint smell sometimes faded. Door sound might be cabin creak or a side door near the slope. The investigator noted this discontinuity as characteristic of memories under pressure, stress, and long-forgotten time. However, each individual detail matched physical scene and digital evidence, creating a reasonable chain when analyzed overall. The limping steps previously recorded by wildlife camera were also compared with Ava's description. Feeling of maintaining balance, avoiding light, adjusting direction and speed in the cabin. These factors fit the appearance of a second person indirectly affecting her, guiding, moving items, or simply creating mental pressure, causing Ava to change walking rhythm, speed, and step direction. The investigator noted, details Ava remembered: lighter sound, mint smell, door sound, flashlight, no appearance in Liam's file. Therefore, at least part of Ava's memories related to the second unidentified individual. This sign, combined with male footprints at cabin, resin sticky fingerprints, and scattered evidence, showed Ava experienced direct interaction time with two individuals. One threatening or pressuring, one supporting or moving her through sparse forest, matching the 3-sentence statement Ava gave when found. Other details recorded included sound positions: lighter near floor, light from west window, mint smell spreading around fireplace area, while male footprints stopped nearby. Combined, all these signs matched Reynolds Creek cabin evidence, scattered trail evidence, and wildlife camera data, creating a logical model of time and space Ava experienced before being found. Cognitive interview ended when Ava appeared too tired to continue, but all collected data was enough to clearly determine an important part: presence of the second person, different from Liam Drake, and direct influence on Ava surviving throughout the weeks she was missing. Details from these shattered memories would be combined with physical evidence and digital data to continue identifying this person's identity and accurately reconstructing events before Ava was found. After the cognitive interview with Ava ended, the investigation team began piecing evidence together to visualize more clearly the event chain in Reynolds Creek cabin and surrounding area. The cabin had been where Ava was present, and physical signs had been collected earlier. Female and male footprints, Ava's hair, resin sticky fingerprints, partially burned paracord, and scattered trail evidence. Cross-referencing with Ava's statements, the investigation team saw a clear pattern: involvement of two individuals, one threatening, one supporting. Cabin DNA data became the focus. Unknown hair and resin sticky fingerprints were examined in detail. Lab confirmed cabin DNA related to unknown male. 1. Not in citizen records. Not matching Liam Drake. These fingerprints, combined with cabin positions near fireplace, west window, and north floor, showed this person stood still or actively handled cabin items when Ava was present. This matched details Ava described in cognitive interview: flashlight into face, lighter sound, and pressure from behind forcing her to move carefully. Meanwhile, partially burned paracord was examined more closely and determined directly related to Liam Drake. Type, length, color, and brand completely matched items Liam carried on his hike. Though Liam denied any direct actions related to Ava, this paracord appeared in forest and cabin area, placing him in an indirect position, possibly interacting with evidence but not directly threatening Ava. When piecing the data together, the picture gradually became clear. One individual, unknown male one, was the person creating pressure or threatening Ava, which Ava remembered through the lighter sound, flashlight beams, and mint smell. Meanwhile, Liam might have been the helper, moving items or indirectly protecting Ava in the mountain forest areas, but he did not directly create the danger. Ava still could not identify the face of either person, which was reasonably explained by the thick fog conditions, low light, and actions carried out during the time she was panicked. She only remembered details about smell, sound, light, and physical pressure, but could not clearly see faces or identify who was who. Combined with cabin and trail data, the investigation team determined that one person followed, one helped a clear role emerging in Ava's survival journey, but unable to separate by direct visual identification from the victim. The female and male footprints in the cabin were analyzed for interaction. Female footprints near Ava's fallen hair and resin sticky fingerprints, while male footprints circled the fireplace and window, showing the man handled something or stood observing. Distance and direction indicated the man and Ava coexisted in the cabin, but no direct conflict appeared. Liam's paracord appeared at scattered points outside the trail, creating a connection with previous scattered evidence but not passing through the cabin, reinforcing the hypothesis that he helped move items or guided Ava through parts of the sparse forest she had to cross. The previously scattered evidence backpack, SIM card, paracord, now placed in new positions on the diagram. Unknown male, one standing near the fireplace and window, creating psychological pressure, or directly observing Ava, while Liam handled scattered items, or led Ava through rugged areas. The fog period on the trail matched wildlife camera data, and Ava's camera timestamps. Ava moving with a limp, one person standing close, and another indirectly interacting with evidence. The investigator prepared a detailed report, noting everything. Reynolds Creek cabin had female footprints matching Ava, unidentified male footprints and resin sticky fingerprints as unknown male 1, unknown hair consistent with Ava, paracord belonging to Liam Drake. GPS data, wildlife camera, and scattered trail evidence combined, matching Ava's statements in the cognitive interview. Each element pointed to different roles of the two individuals, but still could not determine their direct relationship or specific intentions during the time Ava vanished. The overall model was established. Ava moved inside the cabin, stopping at fireplace and window positions, approached or observed by unknown male 1. Liam moved items, paracord, or guided Ava through part of the sparse forest. Biological signs, footprints, and evidence all supported this model. Ava existed in the cabin, indirectly or directly, interacting with 2 individuals, experiencing stress and risk, but still surviving. Digital data, including GPS, wildlife camera, and recovered photos from Ava's camera, all supported the 2-figure model. Liam's timeline gap, paracord, and cabin evidence matched positions and times Ava experienced in the cognitive interview. Lighter, mint smell, cabin door sound, flashlight. No direct evidence proved Liam threatened Ava, but unknown male 1 appearing through fingerprints, footprints, and cabin data was the person likely threatening or creating psychological pressure. The investigation team synthesized the cabin diagram, scattered evidence, GPS, wildlife camera, footprints, fingerprints, hair, paracord, and Ava's statements. Each element was numbered and time-stamped, allowing experts to create a complete logical picture. Ava experienced the disappearance period with the presence of 2 individuals, 1 following or threatening, 1 indirectly helping, in thick fog and treacherous mountain forest conditions. After evidence pieces were analyzed, the case file brought Liam Drake to trial in Flathead County, with charges directly related to events at Glacier National Park. Regarding Reynolds Creek cabin, partially burned paracord, and scattered trail evidence, the court determined Liam had an indirect interaction role, guiding or moving items, but insufficient evidence to prove he directly participated in threatening or seriously endangering Ava Collins. Prosecutors argued that Liam knew Ava was in danger and another individual was present in the cabin, but he did not prevent or report it in time. This behavior was classified as obstruction, obstructing investigation efforts and indirectly causing risk to the victim. At the same time, the movement pattern, leaving scattered items on the trail, and carelessness in managing paracord were considered reckless endangerment, creating risk for Ava in the treacherous mountain forest environment. Throughout the trial, defense attorneys emphasized that Liam did not directly participate in violence, did not kidnap, did not threaten Ava in any way, and there was no evidence of kidnapping or assault behavior. They presented evidence. Male footprints at the cabin did not match Liam, partially burned paracord did not prove he directly handled it, and resin sticky fingerprints belonged to unknown male 1. Additionally, since Ava could not identify either person's face, defense asserted Liam was only indirectly involved in the event. Not committing heavier criminal offenses, the jury evaluated physical evidence, footprints, cabin data, and digital evidence. Analysis experts assessed that Liam was involved in moving items and paracord, but insufficient basis to conclude he directly participated in any violence or kidnapping. Therefore, heavier criminal charges, kidnapping, assault were dropped during negotiation with prosecutors. Ultimately, Liam was convicted of obstruction of investigation and reckless endangerment, with the jury deciding a sentence of 10 to 12 years in prison. The court emphasized this was a considered sentence based on Liam's indirect role, involvement in scattering evidence, and potential danger his actions caused Ava. No direct violence factor and insufficient kidnapping evidence kept the penalty limited to charges related to obstructing investigation and endangerment. During sentencing, the court noted that Liam cooperated with investigators after Ava was found, providing information about his items and paracord locations, but that did not offset his failure to report Ava's presence and ensure her safety during the time she moved through the remote forest. The penalty aimed to deter and emphasize indirect responsibility of individuals when aware of risk and failing to act. The court required Liam to serve his sentence at a Flathead County detention facility with 10 to 12 years imprisonment and supervision after release. Evidence related to the cabin, paracord, and footprints was preserved for cases involving unknown male 1. Court decisions fully incorporated scene data, digital data, evidence analysis, and Ava's statements. ensuring fairness while reflecting Liam's actual role in the entire event chain. This outcome closed the legal processing of Liam Drake, but kept the case file open regarding unknown male 1 for continued investigation and verification. Investigation agencies continued focusing on remaining physical and digital signs, especially Reynolds Creek cabin, wildlife camera data, and clues Ava provided in the cognitive interview to identify the second person's identity and exact role. After Liam Drake was convicted and sent to prison, the Reynolds Creek cabin file continued to be carefully reviewed. Footprints, hair fibers, and evidence from the cabin showed at least one unidentified male directly interacting with Ava. The lab confirmed that cabin DNA and fingerprints related to unknown male 1, but all efforts to identify this man failed. No criminal record, no demographic data, no digital traces. He vanished completely from every system. Investigators temporarily named him Unknown Male 1, but he remained an enigma, existing in the scene file without any piece of information revealing his true identity. In the cabin, experts noticed strange signs. On the floor and near the window were a third set of footprints, smaller, and not belonging to Ava or Unknown Male 1. These footprints had no identified owner, did not match Liam Drake, and their positions showed this person had moved through the cabin. No related biological evidence, only footprints and blurred soil marks. This opened the possibility of a third individual present, but unclear whether their role was support or observation. The cabin, already the physical focus of the case, now became a multi-layered, mysterious scene, where 3 people were involved in the event chain: Ava, Unknown Male 1, and the unidentified third person. Glacier National Park still retained its characteristic silence. The mountain slopes, deep valleys, and sparse forests Ava had moved through 4 years earlier remained intact, with treacherous areas any visitor would find hard to access. The scattered evidence backpack, paracord, SIM card still lay along the trail, reminding of Ava's steps and those of the involved individuals, but no one besides Liam had been identified. Reynolds Creek cabin, with footprints, hair, and Unknown Male 1's fingerprints, became a frozen moment in time, where every physical piece existed but the real answers about the stalker and the rescuer remained absent. Ava, after being rescued and recovering, shared fragmented memories in the cognitive interview. She could not determine which of the 2 wanted her to live, could not clearly see faces, only remembered the mint smell, lighter sound, flashlight beams, and feeling of pressure. This statement matched all cabin and trail evidence, but could not identify who was the second person and who was Unknown Male 1. She also remembered no identifying actions from the third person, if they truly existed. The investigation team noted a clear fact: Unknown Male 1 was never identified, left no digital traces, and appeared in no civil or criminal databases. His footprints and fingerprints only existed physically at the cabin. Indirect evidence but insufficient for identification or prosecution. Meanwhile, the cabin also showed signs of a third person's presence, with footprints and soil disturbance signs, but insufficient data to clarify role or connection to Ava's disappearance event. With all available data, the remaining question was, who pulled Ava away? Who helped her survive those weeks in the forest? Glacier still held its mystery, with thick fog, treacherous valleys, and sparse forest, where traces could exist without detection. Reynolds Creek cabin, paracord, SIM card, footprints, and physical evidence only provided part of the picture, not fully explaining all behaviors and decisions of the involved individuals. All evidence pointed to Ava surviving thanks to interactions with 2 different individuals, one stalker creating pressure, one indirectly helping her move and survive. However, the identities of Unknown Male 1 and the third person remained unidentified, and Glacier, with its vast and complex terrain, still kept the final answer secret. The question of who pulled Ava away and who saved her remained the biggest final question mark in the case file, existing as an unsolved mystery in the history of disappearances at Glacier National Park. The story of Ava Collins, disappearing in Glacier National Park and surviving after 4 years, contains many important lessons that Americans can draw to protect themselves and their families. First, preparation and vigilance in wilderness environments are crucial. Ava vanished in just seconds when thick fog rolled in, emphasizing that even a short trail segment holds danger if you do not stay with the group, lack communication devices, or fail to observe surroundings. The Collins family struggled when the trail forked, and they did not know which way Ava went, showing the necessity of using maps, GPS, and personal tracking devices in outdoor activities. Second, the story highlights the importance of keeping personal items and digital data. Clues from phone, GPS, camera EXIF data, and wildlife cameras became decisive factors in confirming Ava's presence and the second person. In modern life, using location tracking apps, recording images, and GPS information not only serves personal purposes, but can save lives in emergencies. Third, the story reveals that others can be help or danger, and we cannot always identify who is who. Ava could not identify the two people's faces, but one monitored, and one helped her survive. The lesson is that in dangerous environments, maintaining safe distance, not going alone, and sharing movement plans with trusted people can reduce the risk of encountering bad actors. Finally, the story also teaches about patience and cooperation from family, investigators, and community. Ava's family reported immediately when she vanished. Ranger and NPS teams coordinated tracking physical and digital data, and finally hikers discovered Ava alive. This emphasizes that in American life, protecting loved ones and trusting authorities, while noting any unusual signs and fully cooperating, is the best way to respond to emergencies, from disappearances to outdoor accidents. This story is not just a strange disappearance, but also a lesson in preparation, vigilance, technology, and cooperation, all directly applicable to daily activities, from hiking and camping to other dangerous situations in modern American life. Please subscribe so you don't miss mysterious cases and survival stories like Ava Collins' journey. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video as we explore more unsolved mysteries in America's wilderness.